The evening the dog returned, the world outside my house was soaked in rain, and the sky carried the same heaviness that had been living inside my chest for months. I had just placed my late wife's picture back on the mantel, the frame still warm from my hands, when I heard weak scratching at the front door. It was slow, fragile, almost like the hand of someone who wasn't sure they deserved to knock. For a moment I ignored it, thinking it was the wind or maybe some loose branch brushing against the wood. But then it came again, followed by a faint whine, and something inside me froze because I knew that sound. It was the same soft cry that had once echoed through the halls every evening when he waited for her footsteps. It was the cry of her loyal dog, Milo, whom I had buried in my grief long before the world said he was gone. Before you continue watching this story, if you believe in kindness, loyalty, second chances, and the miracles that appear when hope is almost gone, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories of love and humanity reach hearts that truly need them. I reached for the doorknob with trembling hands, and when the door finally opened, I saw him, Milo, standing there under the heavy rain, drenched, shaking, and thinner than I had ever seen him. His fur was matted with mud, his ribs visible beneath his coat, and his once bright eyes were dull, like he had walked through storms far worse than the one outside. He tried to take a step toward me but stumbled, collapsing on the welcome mat we hadn't changed since my wife passed away. I dropped to my knees instantly, my breath catching in my throat as my hands reached for his cold body. He looked up at me with recognition so deep it shattered something inside me. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a soul returning home after being lost in darkness. I carried him inside, every ounce of his weight feeling like a reminder of the months I had failed him. After my wife died, I couldn't bear the sight of anything that belonged to her, not her clothes, not her books, not even Milo, who had been her shadow since the day she rescued him from a shelter. He slept beside her bed, followed her to the kitchen, waited for her at the window every afternoon. When she passed away suddenly, both of us were broken, but he didn't know how to hide his pain, and I didn't know how to face him. One night he slipped out the back door, and I didn't chase him. My grief had turned into a heavy fog and swallowed everything, including the last piece of her she had left behind. I assumed he wandered off and didn't survive, and now here he was, proving that love sometimes finds its way back even when we push it away. I warmed a towel, gently drying him as his shivers softened. I placed a bowl of food beside him, though he only managed a few bites before laying his head on my lap. For a moment the house felt alive again, filled with a ghost, not the haunting kind, but the comforting presence of my wife's love that had returned through her loyal dog. As he rested, I noticed scars on his paws, fresh ones that looked like he had clawed through rough ground or ran across sharp terrain. I saw a wound near his ear, poorly healed, and his nails were broken. It was clear he had struggled, wandered, maybe fought for survival in places no kindness existed, and yet somehow his broken body had found its way back to the doorstep he once guarded for her. When Milo finally slept, I sat beside him, and the guilt hit me like a wave that dragged every buried memory back to the surface. I remembered the day my wife brought him home, a small ball of fear with eyes that carried a story of abandonment. She promised him he would never be alone again. She kept that promise with her whole heart. But after she left the world, I failed to keep it. I promised myself that if Milo survived the night, I would find out where he had been and why he came back. Something in his eyes had carried more than exhaustion. There had been a purpose. Milo regained strength slowly, and each day he stayed close to me, as if afraid I would disappear too. The more time we spent together, the clearer it became that he had returned for a reason. He often sat by the window like he used to when waiting for her, but now he looked toward the street, alert and focused, as if expecting something, or someone. After a week, he started scratching the door again in the evenings, not weak like before, but determined. When I opened it, he looked back at me, took a few steps outside, and turned as if asking me to follow. Something in my chest told me not to ignore him again. He led me through streets I had never walked, turning with certainty at corners, guiding me down alleys and across small bridges until we reached an abandoned shed behind an old hardware store. He pushed his head inside the broken door and waited. When I followed him in, the sight I saw sent a shock racing through me. There, hidden under a pile of blankets, was a small child, no older than 6, shivering, hugging their knees, their eyes wide with fear and hunger. Milo walked to the child gently and lay beside them, licking their hand as if comforting them the way he once comforted my wife. My heart pounded as the child whispered that they had been abandoned by a relative who was supposed to care for them. They had been hiding alone for days. They said Milo found them in the rain, brought them food scraps, and kept them warm by sleeping next to them at night. I looked at Milo then, understanding everything, the scars, the exhaustion, the determination in his eyes. He hadn't been wandering aimlessly. He had been protecting a lost child the way he once protected my wife. Despite all the pain he endured, he still chose to love, still chose to save someone who needed him. I brought the child home, cleaned them up, fed them, and called the authorities to ensure they would be safe. The social worker who arrived told me they had been searching for the child for days. Milo sat beside me the entire time, his head resting gently on my knee, as if reminding me that he had fulfilled a promise to someone he loved, even if she was no longer here. That night, as Milo lay curled at the foot of my bed, I realized he had returned not only because he missed us, but because my wife's love had taught him never to abandon anyone who needed help. He came home only to guide me to someone who was lost, just like we had once been. Before the story ends, if this journey touched your heart even a little, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these emotional stories reach more people who believe in compassion and loyalty. And please leave a comment telling what part of this story touched you the most. In the quiet that followed, I knelt beside Milo and whispered an apology I should have spoken months ago. He looked at me with forgiving eyes, the same eyes that once looked at my wife when she held him close. I realized then that Milo wasn't just her dog. He was her legacy, the living reminder that love, when given sincerely, never dies. It simply finds new ways to return, even if it has to limp through storms to reach us again.